Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is finally a tutorial on how I made this crochet top. I made this top last summer, so I don't actually have it with me because I left it in Thailand, but I will show you today how I made it. So as I mentioned, I don't have the original top to show you, and I also don't have the exact same yarn that I used for that top, but I did use a DK yarn, so that's what I've got here. I've got a plain white one. With my original top, I had 3 different types of yarn. I had that orange, the pink, and then like a variated version of those 2 colors mixed together into a ball. So that's how I got that colored effect. So unfortunately, I won't be able to do that with this top, but this top will be the exact same silhouette and style. It'll just be one color. So for this top, as I said, I'm using a DK yarn, and you're gonna need a variation of hook sizes. So for the top part, I used a 3.5mm hook, and then for the lace part at the bottom, you can actually use whatever you want. I can't really remember what I used, but I'm pretty sure I used like a 6, an 8, and a 10 or something like that. So you'll just need a bigger hook size to create that loose effect. So for the top, I'm going to start with a chain, and I'm going to make a chain that's long enough to reach around just underneath my bust. So as with all of my tutorials, I don't really explain how to do the stitches and like how to chain and everything because that would just make the video way too long. So if you don't know how to do that already, then I would recommend you go and learn that first and then come back to this video. Okay, so I finished my chain and I did 117, and you want to make sure that you have an odd number of stitches. And when I put it around, it just reaches the middle. So you do not want these to overlap, because when you come to tie up the top, if they overlap, then it might be loose. So just make sure they just about touch in the middle. And now you'll want to grab a stitch marker to mark out how big we need to make the cups. So again, I'm just going to put it around and make sure they meet in the middle. Then I'm going to grab my stitch marker, and I kind of want my cup to end just underneath my armpit. So I'm probably going to just mark it out about there, and then just take that off. So once you've done this, you'll just want to count how many chains there are from the stitch marker to the end of your chain. So from my stitch marker to the end of my chain, there are 31 chains, including the one that the stitch marker is in. So now I'm going to go to the beginning of my chain, and I'm going to count from the start, 31 stitches, and then put in a stitch marker, and that just makes sure that the cups are the same on both sides. Okay, so I have my chain here, my 2 stitch markers. Basically where the chain starts and ends is going to be the front of the top, and this bit between the 2 stitch markers is the back of the top. So for my original top, I did the cups just straight rows of double crochets, and I did the back a mesh stitch. If you do want to do your whole top just using double crochets, you can, but I did a mesh stitch just because number one, it's faster, it uses less yarn, and I think it's quite a cute pattern. So that's what I'm going to do for this top. So to start the first row, I'm going to chain an extra 2. And then I'm going to double crochet into the 3rd chain from my hook. And just to let you know, I do not count these chain 2s as stitches, so when we come to the end of this row, we're not going to be double crocheting into this chain 2. So now I'm just going to do 1 double crochet in each chain until I reach my stitch marker. So I'm nearly at my stitch marker, and once I reach my stitch marker, we're going to start doing the mesh stitch. So I'm just going to take my stitch marker out and do my final double crochet into that chain. And now we're going to start with the mesh stitch. So instead of double crocheting into the next stitch, I'm going to chain 1, skip that next chain, and then double crochet into the chain after that. And then again, I'm going to chain 1, skip the next chain, and then double crochet into the chain after that one. And for this part, you want to make sure that you aren't doing your chains too tight. You want to leave them a bit loose, because if you make this too tight, then the back of your top will be tighter and it might not fit. So I'm just going to keep doing this mesh stitch until I reach my next stitch marker. So I have 1 more mesh stitch until I've reached my stitch marker. So I'm going to do my final chain and then double crochet into that chain. And this is why you're going to want an odd number of chains for the mesh stitch to work. But now I'm just going to finish off the row by doing a double crochet in each stitch like we did at the beginning of the row. So I'm just going to do my double crochets and I'm going to do 1 in each stitch until the end of the row. So I'm nearly at the end of my row. I have 2 chains left, so I'm just going to do my last 2 double crochets. And once I've done this, I'm just going to wrap this around my chest again just to make sure that it still fits me. So I would recommend you do the same thing. And once you've confirmed that this still fits around you, then we can start the next row. So to start the next row, we're going to do the exact same thing. So I'm going to chain 2, turn my work, and I'm going to double crochet into that very first stitch because I do not count the chain 2s as stitches. And I'm going to keep doing double crochets in each stitch until I reach the last double crochet before the mesh stitch. So I've nearly reached the mesh stitch portion of my top, so I'm going to do my last few double crochets. And once I reach this point, I'm just going to do the mesh stitch again. So chain 1, and then double crochet into the double crochet from the previous row. And then chain 1, skip the chain, and then double crochet into the stitch from the previous row. So again, I'm just going to repeat this until I reach the double crochet portion of my top. And once I reach here, I'm just going to do double crochets. So I'm on my last mesh stitch. I'm going to chain 1, double crochet, chain 1. And once I've reached this double crochet portion, I'm just going to do 1 double crochet in each stitch until I reach the end of the row. So I finished that second row, and this is what it looks like so far. So this is the back of the top where the mesh stitch is, and these are going to be the 2 cups. So if I were to just try this on for you, this is how it's looking like. So now you're just going to want to keep repeating rows of these stitches until you get to a point where you kind of want your top to start making like a v-neck. So for my original top, I think I did 3 rows in total before I started decreasing, but I think I'm going to do more this time. So I'm going to do another 2 rows before I start doing decreases. You're probably going to have to do more than me just because I am not very blessed up here. So it really depends on your cup size. So as you're crocheting this, I really recommend after each row, you just try it on and see whether you want to start doing your decreases, because when we start doing the decreases, that's where the top is going to start cutting off like that. So again, I'm going to do 4 rows in total. So I already have 2. I'm going to do 2 more, and then I'm going to start decreasing. So once I do 2 more rows, I will show you how to start doing the decreases. So I finished my 4th row, and this is what it looks like. So again, when I put it on, it is a bit bigger now. It's kind of reached like right underneath my nipple. So I think this is a good marker for where to start the decreases. But obviously if you want yours to be more covered, then you'll want to do more rows of this before you start decreasing. And if you start decreasing earlier, then your top will be more V-cut or more cleavage basically. So to start the decreasing row, it's super simple. I'm going to chain 2. And then I'm going to double crochet 2 together. So I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into the first stitch, pull through a loop, insert my hook into the second stitch, pull through a loop, and then yarn over and pull through all the loops on my hook except for the last one. So now there should be 2 loops on your hook, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2. And then from here, I'm going to double crochet and do the rest of the row like how we have been for the previous 4 rows. So for this double crochet section, I'm going to double crochet until I reach this point, do my mesh stitch, and then do a double crochet in each stitch until I reach the end. When you reach the end, you'll want to leave 2 stitches left for a decrease on this side. So when I reach this end, I will show you how to decrease at the end of the row. So once I reach my last 2 stitches here, I will show you how to do a decrease at the end of the row. So I'm nearly at the end of this row. I'm going to do my double crochets until there are 2 stitches left. And once there are 2 stitches left, I'm going to do another decrease the same way we decrease at the beginning. So I'm going to yarn over, insert my hook into the first stitch, pull through a loop, insert my hook into the last stitch, pull through a loop, yarn over and pull through 3 loops, and then yarn over and pull through the last 2. And that is the first decrease row done. So now I'm going to keep repeating these decrease rows. So again, chain 2, turn my work, and then decrease at the beginning of the row. So yarn over and insert my hook into the first stitch, pull through a loop, insert my hook into the next stitch and pull through a loop, yarn over and pull through 3, and then yarn over and pull through 2. And then I'm just going to repeat the row we just did, doing the double crochets, the mesh stitch, and then the decrease at the end. So I have 6 rows in total now, 4 non-decrease and then 2 with decreases, and this is what it looks like. So when I try the top on, this is what it looks like, and it basically comes to right under my armpit, so I think I'm going to start the arm section here. So again, you're going to want to grab a stitch marker and just kind of put it in line with your shoulder. So for example, I'm looking in my viewfinder and I can see it's about here. So I'm just going to put my stitch marker in this section here. So this is where we're going to continue building the shoulder piece up. Obviously, if you want this to be bigger, you can make it bigger, but just keep in mind that it might come from underneath your armpit and it might be a bit uncomfortable. And if you do want it thinner, you could do like a thinner strap. So put your stitch marker around here, but it's completely up to you. And just a note, I am from this point on going to use a mesh stitch for the shoulder part. So you'll just want to make sure that your nipple is fully covered before you start doing the mesh part. Otherwise it's going to be see-through. So if it's not covered yet, then you want to do more rows of just double crochets instead of the mesh stitch, but it's otherwise completely the same. So before continuing on to the shoulder part, you'll just want to count how many stitches you have here. So I have 15, including my stitch marker. If you have an even number, you'll just either want to add or remove one because you want to have an odd number. And once you've counted that, we're just going to add the same stitch marker on the other side. So I'm going to count 15 stitches in from the edge. So as I mentioned before, if this section isn't enough to cover your nipples, then you'll want to do a normal row of double crochets instead of the mesh stitch that I'm about to show you. So to start, I'm going to chain 2. And I still do not count these as stitches. And I'm going to double crochet into the very first stitch. Chain 1, and then I'm going to skip the next stitch and then double crochet into the stitch after that. So it's basically the exact same mesh stitch we were doing over here. So again, I'm going to chain 1, skip the next stitch, and then do a double crochet. And I'm going to repeat this until I reach my stitch marker. So I'm nearly at my stitch marker. I'm just going to take it out and do my final mesh stitch. And then from here, I'm going to chain 2, turn my work. Now I'm going to double crochet into that first stitch, chain 1, and then skip the next chain and double crochet into the next stitch. Once I reach the end of the row, I'm doing my final mesh stitch, chain 2, turn my work, and basically just keep repeating this. So you're going to want to keep repeating these rows of stitches until it gets long enough to reach the top of your shoulder. So I'm going to do mine and then show you what I mean and let you know how many rows I ended up doing. So I did 14 rows in total of the mesh stitch on top of my piece. So this is what it looks like so far. I've only done one side. And when you do try it on, just even if you look like you're a row short, just pull it up a bit because when we do the back and we put the top on, we don't want it to be too loose. So this is what mine looks like when I pull it a bit. That's when it reaches the top of my shoulder. So now I'm going to do the same mesh stitch on the other side. So I'm just going to make a slip knot and then leave a long enough tail to stitch this piece to the back piece when we come around to doing it later, just so that there's less ends to weave in. And now for the other side. So since we started this mesh stitch going inwards, I'm going to also keep that same direction and start from my stitch marker here going outwards. So to start my first row, I'm going to do a standing double crochet. So I will just show you how I do that. If you would prefer to attach your yarn and then chain 3 and then continue doing your mesh stitch, that's completely up to you. But to do a standing double crochet, I just make a slip knot, yarn over, and then insert my hook into the stitch with the stitch marker in it, yarn over and pull through a loop, and then yarn over and pull through the next 2 loops, and then the last 2 loops. And then from there, I'm going to chain 1, skip the next stitch, and then do my double crochet, and then chain 1, skip the next stitch, and then do my double crochet. So we're basically doing the same thing that we did for the other side, except starting from here instead of the outside. And again, once I reach the end of this row, I'm going to do my final mesh stitch, chain 2, turn my work, double crochet into that first stitch, chain 1, and then continue doing my mesh stitch. So I'm going to do another 14 rows on this side just to match my first side, and then once we're done with that, we can start on the back of the top. So I finished crocheting the 14 rows of mesh stitches on both sides, and this is what my piece looks like so far. So now it's time to work on the back piece. So again, we're going to mark out where we need to do it. So I'm just going to put my top on. So I've just put my top on to mark out where the back piece needs to be. And for my original top, I just did the back piece along the entire part of the mesh stitch. So I think I'm going to end up doing the same thing for this piece because my mesh stitch is kind of in line with my shoulder. If your mesh stitch comes a bit further up, then you might need to just mark out the back here. But for me, my mesh stitch looks like it's pretty much just my back piece, which is perfect. So I'm going to do mine that size. Again, if you want your back portion to be smaller, then obviously just mark out a smaller section. But I'm just going to do mine the same as my first piece. So I have my piece here and my last row of mesh stitches are going that way. So I'm going to turn my work so that I'm working in the opposite direction just so that the pattern of the stitches goes the right way. So to attach my yarn, I'm going to do the same method I used for this piece here. So I'm going to do a standing double crochet. So I'm going to make a slip knot and I'm going to go to the very first stitch before the mesh portion. I'm going to yarn over and insert my hook into that stitch, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, then yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops. And from here, I'm just going to do the mesh stitch like normal. So I'm going to chain 1, skip the chain, and then do a double crochet into the next stitch. Chain 1 and skip the next chain, and then do a double crochet. So it's the exact same thing that we did for this piece here. So again, I'm going to keep doing rows of this mesh stitch, and when I get to this part, I will show you how to start the next row, but it is pretty much the same as the shoulder piece here. Okay, so it's now the next day. I finished my 14 rows of the mesh stitch on the back, so your piece should look something like this. And again, just to try it on and show you what it should look like. And when I pull my back piece up, it reaches the top of my shoulder and meets perfectly with the piece that I crocheted for my shoulder. So this is roughly what yours should look like so far. So now I'm going to stitch the shoulder piece to the back. You could actually do this step last, but I like to stitch this together just so that I can easily try it on the top while I crochet the mesh bit at the bottom so that I can see how long it's going to be. Okay, I apologize for the lighting. It's super sunny in my room, so hopefully you can see what I'm doing, but this is my back piece. So I'm just going to finish off this back piece by making a slip knot. And so to stitch the 2 pieces together, you could either use a needle and the leftover thread, which is what I'm going to do, or you can just slip stitch the 2 pieces together. I'm just going to grab my needle and thread my yarn. You can pretty much do this however you want. Once I thread my needle, I'm just going to do a straight stitch. So I'm just going to line up my stitches so each mesh stitch is on top of each other. And then I'm just going to insert my needle through the stitches on the other side. And then also through the chains. And you can do whatever stitch you like. This is just the easiest one. And then once I've stitched this side, I'm going to do the exact same thing for the other shoulder, and then we'll get started on the mesh stitch. So I've stitched both my shoulders together, and now I'm going to start working on the lace at the bottom. So now we're going to do a row of single crochets along the bottom of the piece that we have so far, just so that we can work our stitches into the row. So to start, I'm going to make a slip knot, and I'm going to insert my hook into that very first stitch, and luckily it is quite easy to see since we started with a chain where to do the stitches. So I'm going to start in that first chain, and I'm going to single crochet around this end just so I don't have to weave it in later. And then I'm going to insert my hook into the next stitch. And you can kind of just insert your hook wherever there's a double crochet. So my double crochet is in that stitch there, so I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch. So I'm going to do a single crochet into each of these stitches, and when it comes to the mesh portion, you can just do a stitch in the double crochet and then in the chain and then the double crochet and so on. It is actually easier to see in this part. So I'm going to do my row of single crochets and meet back with you when I'm done. So for the next row, we're going to do a row of mesh stitches, but instead of double crocheting and then chaining 1, we're going to double crochet and then chain 2 and skip 2 stitches, so there's bigger gaps. So to start this row, I'm going to chain 2. And again, I don't count these as stitches. Turn your work and then double crochet into the first stitch. From there, I'm going to chain 2. I'm going to skip 2 and then double crochet into the next stitch. And again, I'm going to chain 2, skip the next 2 stitches and then double crochet into the next stitch. And I'm just going to keep repeating this until I reach the end of the row. So I've nearly reached the end of this row and I'm kind of left with an awkward number of stitches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to chain 2, and then instead of skipping 2, I'm just going to skip 1. And then I'm going to do the last stitch like normal, so chain 2, skip 2, and then double crochet into the last one. If you also are left with a random number of stitches, then just kind of like mess around, and it doesn't have to look perfect because you really can't tell. So yeah, I just skipped one to like make it look even. You can either chain an extra one and skip 3 or whatever works for you. So now this is the part where you're going to need your bigger crochet hook. So for this next section, I have an 8, a 10, and a 12mm hook, and I'm going to use all 3 of these. However, I realize that not everybody has all of these crochet hooks, so you can just use an 8 or a 10, it really doesn't matter, just as long as it's a bigger crochet hook. So I'm going to insert my hook, I'm going to chain 2, turn my work, and we're just going to do 1 double crochet into each of these mesh stitches. And you want to make sure that these stitches you do are really loose so they're really flowy and they don't make the top shrink. And I'm just going to keep putting 1 double crochet into each mesh stitch. So I'm going to repeat this for the rest of the row until I reach the other end. So I've nearly reached my last stitch. And in the last stitch, I'm going to do 2 double crochets. For the next row, I'm going to chain 2. And I forgot to mention that for these bigger stitches, the chain 2s do count as a stitch. I'm going to turn my work and then double crochet into each double crochet that we've just made, starting in the very first one. This chain 2 and double crochet will serve as the first increase. So we'll be increasing at the start and the end of every row. So I'm going to double crochet into the next stitch and just do 1 double crochet in each stitch until the very end of the row, where in the last stitch we'll do an increase. Okay, once again, I'm nearly at the end of my row. Last few double crochets. And don't forget, because the starting 2 chains count as a stitch, I'm going to do my final increase in that chain 2. So at this point, I do recommend trying on the top, and this is what mine is looking like so far. So you can see that this lace part is starting to come together. So I think I'm going to do a few more rows using the 8mm hook, and then I'm going to switch to the 10mm hook, do a few more rows, and then switch to the 12mm hook. But as I said, you can just use 1 hook size, and it's still going to look just as good. I just want it to look even more flowy as it gets longer. But again, for each row, I'm going to continue to increase at the start and increase at the end, and then just keep doing the rows of double crochet, and you want to keep repeating this until it reaches the length that you want, and then we can finally do the little detail if you want to add it, and add the string, and it's pretty much all done. So I'm going to keep doing these rows and I will let you know how many I end up doing. Okay, so I finished doing the mesh stitch for my top, and this is how it looks. So for my top, I ended up doing 5 rows with the 8mm hook, and then 4 rows with the 10mm hook, and then the last 2 rows I used the 12. So when I pull it together, it looks like this. And now the final thing to do is the detailing on the neckline. This is completely optional, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So to finish off the stitch, I'm just going to do a slip knot. So I've got my top laid out here, and for the border we're going to start at the bottom here and then work up and around. So I'm going to take my yarn and make a slip knot. And again, the first row that we do is just going to be a row of single crochets around the border. So I'm going to insert my hook into this row of single crochets here and make a single crochet. And again, I'm going to crochet over this end so I don't have to weave it in. Now you're going to just want to find spaces to insert your hook and do single crochets. So normally I like to do one in the gap where the double crochet is, so this space here, and into the double crochet itself. So my first single crochet is going to go in this space here. And then my next single crochet is going to go into the actual stitch. And just go through the middle of it. And then the next gap, and then into the next stitch, which in this row is a chain 2. and then into the next space, and then the next stitch. And again, I'm going to repeat this around the entire border of the neckline until I reach the other side. And then of course, when you reach this mesh part of the top, you can just do one single crochet into each stitch. So I'm just going to insert a single crochet in here somewhere. It really doesn't matter where you put it. It doesn't have to be super precise. And then I'm just going to do one single crochet in each double crochet and each chain. Okay, so I've crocheted all the way around and I'm nearly at the row of single crochets again. So I'm going to do my final single crochet in there. And now for this row, we're going to do a shell stitch. So to do a shell stitch, we're going to start by chaining one, turn our work, and then I'm going to do one single crochet into that very first stitch. And then I'm going to skip the next 2 stitches. So 1, 2, and I'm going to do 5 double crochets into this third stitch here. And then from there, I'm going to skip the next 2 stitches and then do a single crochet into the third stitch. And then I'm going to repeat this pattern. So I'm going to skip 2 stitches, do 5 double crochets into the third stitch, skip the next 2 stitches, and then single crochet into the third stitch. And so you'll want to keep repeating this shell stitch around the entire border until we reach the other side again. So I've nearly reached the end of my row and I only have 5 stitches left, which means I don't have enough stitches to skip 2, double crochet 5 in 1, and then skip another 2 and then single crochet. But that doesn't matter because instead of skipping 2 stitches, I'm going to just skip 1 and then do my 5 double crochets. And now I'm going to skip 2 and do my final single crochet in there. So if you get to the end of your row and you realize that you don't really have the right number of stitches, it really doesn't matter. As I said, just kind of mess around with it and see where you can just skip less stitches or skip more stitches and fit in that final shell there. So now that I'm done with this row, I'm going to make a slip knot and cut off my yarn. And now all there's left to do is to make a chain to tie the front of the top together. So personally, I just like to make a chain that's long enough to go through this stitch here, through this stitch, and then tie at the front. But if you want to make a chain that will go through the entire top, then feel free to do that. Okay, so I've made my chain here. I think it's about 60 centimeters, and before I cut it off, I'm just going to thread the top as if I were going to wear it just to see whether it's long enough. So I'm going to put my chain through this stitch here, and then through the same stitch on the other side. And then I'm just going to tie a little bow. And that is what my top would look like. So I'm pretty happy with this length. I'm going to go ahead and cut off the end of my yarn. As I mentioned, if you want this string to go all the way around, you just need to make it longer, obviously, and then try it on. But yeah, now I'm just going to weave in the end and I will give you a little try on. So this is how the top turned out. I'm super pleased with the fact that I can still remember how I made it, even though I made it like 8 months ago. So I apologize for the fact that this has taken so long. If you do have any questions, then leave them in the comments or DM me on Instagram and I will try to reply on one of those. And as usual, if you do make anything, please tag me. I love to see what everybody makes. And if you have any requests for what I should make next, then do let me know. But yeah, as usual, the written pattern will be in the description at some point in the future. I normally post the video first and then start working on the pattern just because I like to get the video out as soon as possible. And the pattern isn't really necessary. It's just kind of something to like go along with the video if you need it. So yeah, that should be in there as soon as it's ready. I hope you have a great week and I will see you in the next video. Bye!